Hello everybody, it's the 24th of April today, and the buds on this big Beech fusion project are swelling and bursting, so it's high time I got on with its repot. As you can see, yeah, the buds are well and truly bursting, so yeah, high time, let's get on with it. Almost left it too late, but yeah, needs doing. I've got some trees I want to put in it to fill in some gaps at the back, and all in all it needs a bit of a trim back and a tidy up to try and keep the growth in close to the central conical trunk. So I think I'm going to have to work on it in situ pretty much. It's such a lump, that pot, and the trees themselves aren't the lightest. So anyway, here's where I'm going to lose my train of thought. Brains back in gear. First thing I want to do is get the trees that I'm going to try and tuck into this fusion project out of their pot and into a bucket of water so that they're ready to go in, and I have them to hand. For those of you that like to see Cooper, here he is, recovering from his latest adventure along the river, snoozing in the sun. Okay, so these were some beech plants being sold for hedging, bare root possibly. I honestly can't remember, they might have been in a pot, but I put 6 in this air pot and only 3 survived. But I'm going to try and get them into this fusion project to fill in some of the gaps where other trees died in that originally, but there's one that sadly didn't make it, and another, but the 3 that are left are good, healthy, and hopefully they'll fit right into the gaps that I've got. So let's get them out of the pot. Okay, move this big old pot basket to one side, and then we can see what we've got here. Now, these should be able to slot fairly easily in. We've already got quite a one-sided root ball there, so there I may have to remove a little in terms of depth, but not much, I don't think. Again, this has got a one-sided root ball, so that should fit in relatively easily. This one hasn't got much of a root ball at all, but I think it'll survive. So I'm not going to trim those roots unless I have to. I'm going to put them in a bucket of water so they don't dry out. It's a nice sunny day, but it's also a very windy day, so those roots will dry out really quickly. I just left them, so they're safe, and now we can tackle getting the big tree out of that big lump of a pot. Okay, first of all, apologies, I know it's not ideal viewing with such a cluttered background and things, but maybe if it's not too heavy I'll try and wrestle it up onto the bench. We'll see. If not, I'll just do it in situ here, where it is. Okay, well, it's going to come out easy enough. God, blimey. But it is very heavy. Maybe if I can work some of the soil off. It seems to be stuck to the drainage screens, perhaps. There we go. Got it. It hasn't filled this pot anywhere near as much as I expected it to, but there we are. The root is out. Okay, obviously I need to get rid of all these blooming weeds that have grown up in there. And See if I can manoeuvre this around so show you the back of the trees. The trees of the tree. How do you want to call it? Okay. It's heavy. That's how I want to call it. As you can see, there's a couple of really big gaps where I had some failures of the initial batch of trees. There is a playlist from when I first constructed this. It wasn't ever planned to be this big a tree. Unfortunately, either I or the company that I ordered the trees mixed up the order, and I ended up with much bigger trees than I wanted, hence this great big thing that it turned into. But there you go, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, as they say. So I'm going to try and make some gaps here where I can tie the trees in, sort of the new trees that is, and see if I can manoeuvre this around so show you the back of the trees. The trees of the tree. How do you want to call it? Okay. It's heavy. That's how I want to call it. As you can see, there's a couple of really big gaps where I had some failures of the initial batch of trees. There is a playlist from when I first constructed this. It wasn't ever planned to be this big a tree. Unfortunately, either I or the company that I ordered the trees mixed up the order, and I ended up with much bigger trees than I wanted, hence this great big thing that it turned into. But there you go, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, as they say. So I'm going to try and make some gaps here where I can tie the trees in, sort of the new trees that is. And while I'm at it, try and reduce some of the weight to get it back into the pot. I'm not interested too much in reducing root, because obviously it's in its more or less final pot. I know you wouldn't normally put an unfinished tree in a pot, but I often do. If I have the pot, and it's going to be the perfect perfect pot for this project eventually, due to this thing's sheer size. Anyway, I will continue on with this and bring you back to it when I've reduced the root ball a little more. Okay, so I'm going to reduce some of these roots just so that I get a nice flat base when I put this back into the pot. It'll make getting it in and settled much easier than trying to fill in underneath this root ball of all these trees. It should be a bit of a task otherwise, and we don't need these big thick chunky sections of root. when all's said and done. There, that's better. Okay, now looking at the front, I pulled this branch down last year with the intention that it would layer into the surface here, root and start being a tree to fill up into there, which it hasn't done yet, but I'm going to reapply this piece of wire and make sure that this branch stays locked into the soil, and once I'm sure it has properly rooted, then obviously this portion can be cut away. Fusion here at the base, where the trees have actually touched long enough and grown into one another. It's another piece of quite solid fusion. There are 3 trees have fused together there, so gradually it's coming together. We have better fusion at the top, which I'll show you in a minute, but for now let's see if we can get these new trees into the root ball. Okay, so I take back all those things I said about not trimming the root ball too much. I'm going to have to trim them some to get them in. I have to keep it all at a steady level. Well, I suppose that matters too much in the long run, but it certainly does make easier for including them into the package, as it were. That tree needs to come right into there, and I'm going to have to trim it off, I think. Well, maybe not. Maybe I can work the whole thing in. Okay, like so. The trees eventually subsume these pieces of wire, which is great, and you can see there's a wire frame that the whole trees are attached to inside. Hopefully I can just pull that tree into position and pull it back in with the wire. If I can get hold of both pieces. Cack-handed Charlie. There we go. Okay. And the wire snapped off, but that's holding, so that's good. Now then. Next. Again, going to need to trim some of the root off. More than I possibly like, but I need to get that into there somehow. There we go. Okay. There's still going to be a gap, but I can live with that. So I'm going to take this loop of wire, push it through that piece of wire if and I can, so that it catches hold of the wrong bit of wire there. That's it. Okay, and then I should be able to pull that in. It's going to be a while before these trees fill out and fatten up and fill in gaps for proper, as it were, but they will eventually. It's just a question time and patience. Have I got enough of either of those things? I don't know. But remember, this tree's going to fatten, this tree's going to fatten, this tree's going to fatten. So between the three of them, they will eventually fill this gap. Okay, and that leaves the thickest one, the least flexible one, to try and get in there. And I'm not sure it's gonna, unless I remove that chunk of root. That's it, got it. Okay, so same deal. Okay, that's that. Now, it's not going to sit in snugly, so I'm going to have to prune it, and I'm going to take it off at this point. I'll take it off at this point. I have a nice strong branch. I can get my cutters in and cut it away. That should be able to slot into there relatively unobtrusively. Similar deal with this. This is also one of the new trees. I'm going to move it there and tuck that in. I have this nice living leader that will keep it nice, growing nice and strong. And again, this one, like so. And what I can then do is wire these into place, and they will grow away nice and strongly. I will do that off camera. This is already going to be quite a long video. Okay, that's better. So they're tied in nice and tight at the top and at the bottom, and hopefully will grow away nicely in the next couple of seasons. And well, the gap is much smaller to fill in now. That's the main thing. So I'm gonna start trimming back to good solid buds all the way up this tree before I move it, because I want to keep the growth in tight, but I don't want to cut back beyond a bud, because beech don't always respond well if you cut back beyond the bud. Although they do make good hedges and things, it's best if you don't cut past the bud, because you don't want dieback, especially when you've got a project like this going on. But I do want to encourage the growth to remain fairly close into the trunk. I don't want the branches being 5 foot out, if that makes sense. So it's just a question of cutting it almost like you would a hedge, to promote extra bushy growth, and that'll give me branches to choose from in future years closer into the trunk, but also will hopefully fuel the trunks to fatten up. Some of these will probably make some very nice branches one day, hopefully. I'm taking off some of this coarse growth as well, because again, whilst I need the growth to fatten all these trunks and make them fuse, I then don't want huge, great out of proportion branches that I can't use. Okay, getting towards the apex now. Again, I've got some chunky growth up here, which I don't really want to keep, so I'm just going back to a bud and hoping it'll back bud further back into the structure. Let's deal with this apex. Don't want that leader. I'll keep this one, and that way there's less competition. Okay, that's probably done enough. Okay, so I managed to wrestle the beast onto the turn. Hopefully the camera's not wobbling too much. I've got the tripod in a very precarious position to get back far enough that I can try and give you the full. Okay, so I've added a whole bunch of continuous release fertilizer into the bottom of the pot, into the soil that's there, and I'm hoping that I'm just going to be able to drop this tree in on top, this tree, and it's pretty much at the level it was. That's not bad. Could maybe do with being, no, I think that's pretty much spot on. I'm happy with that depth. I wanted it to be a little deeper. Yep, I'm going to go with that. So all it needs now is for me to fill in around. As I say, it's going to be a little bit lower in the pot, which means I can get that piece covered, and I can leave a gap at the top to make sure I can give it plenty of water, because this was a very thirsty project with all these individual trees, each one soaking up a lot of moisture. Eventually it will become one solid lump of wood, as it were, and one solid ecosystem. Is that the right word? I don't actually know if that's the right word or not, but we're getting there, and it'll be one solid individual. Give that a good shake so that the soil can work its way down into any gaps. And let's give it some water. Okay. Apologies, it's a bit noisy. give this tree a good solid watering in. Hopefully it'll grow away happily and continue fusing on. So I can't give you the usual 360, but I can give you the old canvas scale, and eventually, if these do what I want and fuse into one solid trunk, this will be the biggest tree in my collection. The best tree in my collection? Probably not, but I'm having fun doing what I'm doing, and that's what the hobby's all about, really. No stress, just fun. So thank you so much for watching. Do all the usual YouTube things, do the liking and the subscribing and the commenting, but most of all, look after yourselves, everybody. Please stay safe.